So we're going to start with the Honorable Anders Fung. As mentioned, he's a council member in the city of Millbrae, and he's going to be talking about supportive policies for local Asian American communities in California. So Anders, please go ahead.
Thank you, Donald. Thank you so very much. And I also like to thank the entire Hong Kong associations and different chapters for the opportunity to speak to everyone today. Again, my name is Anders Fung. But first of all, in light of what happened in San Jose today, I'd like to say a few words about what happened. So I was quite devastated by some of the horrific shooting incidents that just happened in San Jose this morning. Our heart goes out to the families who lost their loved ones, as well as those who are affected by the shooting incidents. This is just another tragedy involving gun violence, as well as mental health issues. And issues continue to plague our country and our state. And communities must come together and take mental health issues seriously. And incidents such as this could certainly be avoided if we all can just dedicate it proper resources from, between prevention to outreach to proper training to our first responders, as well as clinical treatments to those in need of those assistance. So again, 9 too many lives have been lost today to gun violence and mental health issue. And our heart goes out to the families affected by this. So with that, as far as our discussion of today, the rising anti-Asian violence, the hate crimes and the xenophobias continue to be our national issues. And these issues really need no introductions to anyone that is on this call today. And so, we've all seen the TV, and I don't think anybody can turn on the TV today without witnessing yet another crime committed against the Asian American community. We've seen that 84-year-old AAPI seniors being killed in his own driveway. 2 senior women recently were stabbed while waiting for public transportation in downtown San Francisco in the financial district. And we all saw the video of a young man in New York subway being beaten until he was unconscious. So, seeing this large uptick of hate crime committed against our community, many of those I can pretty much contribute it to those hateful rhetoric, the divisive the narrative of our previous Trump administrations. We had a president who openly blamed the Chinese for causing a global pandemic, as well as blaming China for the ever-widening Sino-US trade gap. And all this have insinuated an anti-Chinese and anti-Asian sentiment throughout the entire country. I've been in this country for over 30 years, and seeing this level of hate crime and xenophobia, it's really unseen in the recent US history. Now, in terms of being in the Bay Area, where I reside, according to the 2010 census, we've got about 33% of our population in San Francisco declare themselves as Asian Pacific Islanders. In San Mateo County, where I reside personally, that statistics, it's about 25%. And that's according to census that was about 11 years ago. And in my jurisdiction, city of Millbrae, we have nearly 50% of our population that declare themselves as API, where ethnic Chinese are approximately 40%. So we're we have a pretty diverse population and demographic here in our part of this country. In terms of some of the things that we've been seeing in terms of activities, given some of the hate crime that we've been seeing throughout the Bay Area and throughout the country, I recently sent out an open letter on February 23rd to the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors and District Attorney, calling for legislative actions to aggressively prosecute and take zero-tolerance stance against these hate crime committed against our community. And since February, there's been many anti-Asian hate rallies throughout the entire Bay Area cities, some in San Mateo, some in Oakland and Fremont, and in San Francisco. Personally, I've held another rally in Millbrae, where my jurisdiction is, on April 17, and it was well attended by the Lieutenant Governor, as well as over 500 people. And on May 15, along with a group of young volunteers, we stepped up the effort a little bit more and organized another rally in San Mateo throughout the country, for the county-wide rally. And the theme of the day was Communities United, and be able to unite all the communities against all these hate crimes, as well as all the xenophobias that we've been seeing among all the marginalized communities in addition to the APIs. Very well attended, and Congresswoman Jackie Spear was also in the audience. And she even gave the API community a US flag that used to be flown in the US Capitol. And her message to us was really to demonstrate the unity with the API community and recognition and the contribution that the API community has made for this country since we built the railroad, as well as commitment to support a diverse and inclusive environment in our community, and supporting our effort to continue to bring about the awareness and the need to take bold and immediate actions against these horrific and senseless violence committed against our seniors and especially the most vulnerable. And so as far as call to action, I think we need to take a more proactive approach in dealing with these issues, such as continue to push for the legislative changes at every level of the government, especially at the state. We need to put more tools into the toolbox of our district attorneys to prosecute these crimes, continue to widen the definitions of hate crimes, and enhance the penalties on these horrific acts, particularly on those that involve weapons, as well as those who committed crime against our seniors and the most vulnerable people, women and children. Working with the state and local government to dedicate additional resources to outreach our API communities. Many of these crimes actually went underreported in terms of statistics. They're largely contributing to some of the factors such as, we have a lot of language barrier as far as our senior goes. They don't speak the language, so talking to the police and the sheriffs is a very difficult task for them. And some due to just the cultural differences that they just do not want to speak to the authorities and the law enforcement. Some of them have psychological reasons, such as they just start blaming themselves for the crime committed against them, or just being shameful, the inside guilt of being a victim of a crime. And some simply think that reporting a crime may not necessarily be helpful because they're not likely to be investigated or prosecuted, and simply be afraid of retaliation. So some of these reasons contributed to the underreporting of these crimes. So we must continue to do these educations and really start discussing these issues at length in school, and that to teach our children that racism is not okay. Xenophobia such as Kung flu, Chinese virus are not okay. This country really is founded by immigrants, and diversity and inclusiveness really are the fundamental values and principles that we all must share, uphold, and continue to defend. So with that, I just kind of want to share a little bit of an example with everyone in the audience today. I went to see my dentist last week, and the hygienist, she came from Guangzhou. She speaks Cantonese with me, and she recognizes me for being a local council member. And we started talking about, some of the things that's been happening in the Asian American community, and that she used to live in San Francisco, in the city. And she's been seeing a lot of these issues regarding safety and feeling unsafe. And she moved with her husband and 2 children to a suburb. And she was telling me that she would feel more safe. And she recently moved to a white people neighborhood. And when I hear that, my first reaction was, we, the Chinese and Asian Americans, sort of felt that, we're at this perpetual mindset of being a foreigner in this country, moving into a white people neighborhood. And yet, this is supposed to be a neighborhood for everybody. And that, we should feel home and we should feel safe. So having that mindset in itself reminds all of us that we need to continue to teach our children that we belong in this country rightfully, and it was founded on immigrants, by immigrants, and inclusiveness as well as just diversity is a fundamental principle of this country. So, as a council member, as a civil servant, and as the only first-generation Chinese-American immigrant, born and raised in Hong Kong, by the way, elected official in San Mateo County, here are some of the things that I see as an important priority for us that I think we really need to advance these agendas. First, I continue to work with the California state legislatures and to widen the definitions of hate crime and protect the most vulnerable API communities members, especially our seniors, and enhance the penalty on those who committed hate crimes, and especially with special circumstances, such as the use of weapons and bodily injury with racially motivated animus. And lately, I've had the opportunity of working with State Senator Josh Becker in drafting legislation to do just these things. And hopefully we can bring forward the legislation that we can all share with the API community as at large, and really open up the discussions on how to protect and make everyone feel safe again. So, and I also recently have been working with the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office and creating and instigating a new community liaison program where the sheriff has actually agreed to dedicate additional law enforcement resources, a high-ranking Asian language speaking officers to serve as a liaison dedicated to the API community. The goal is to ensure that these hate crimes are properly reported, properly investigated and prosecuted, and to continue to educate our public as to how to protect themselves and for crime preventions. And so lastly, last week, the Biden administration signed into a new law of the anti-hate crime bill, where they will dedicate new DOJ resources to prosecute these hate crimes at a federal level, and also through the Health and Human Service agencies under the new Secretary Becerra, who used to be the California Attorney General. Grants will be available to conduct crime reduction programs to prevent and respond to these hate crimes. So I encourage all the Asian American in all communities throughout the entire country to establish their own NPO, nonprofit organizations, to apply for these federal grants that would help bring additional resources to law enforcement and educations and crime preventions that will help the victims of these hate crimes. I myself will do exactly that, forming a new nonprofit and working through our Congresswoman Jackie Spears' office and apply for these federal grants. Hopefully I can instigate a program of anti-hate crime task force in conjunction with our local sheriff's office and bring about more additional law enforcement resources and education, and to keep our community safe.
Well, thank you, Andrew. So there's a lot of questions I'm sure we can cover at the end of the speaker's part of the program. But one question I was wondering before we go on to Fred is California in any way different, maybe better or worse, doing something better, leading by example, not leading by example? Any thoughts about that compared to the rest?
I will say I have been working with the legislature, and the message is very clear that we need to take bold and decisive legislative actions to protect the most vulnerable, our seniors, our API community members, just like as we protect our young women, for example. I mean, there's no mistaking that you're attacking, an 84-year-old Asian man in his own driveway. In much the same way, protecting our young women. And so I think the message is loud and clear, and the national message is there. And we are going to take very decisive action in legislatively, as well as from a law enforcement perspective, to keep our community safe. And that's the first priority for us.
Sure, absolutely.